Welcome to another installment of Vantage Ventures Real Talks. My name is Isaac Obiama. You just hear the banter back and forth between me and Morris. And we're so happy that you're joining us here during this Black History Month. And we're really starting to get the ball rolling on this initiative that we've been working on at Vantage for probably the past couple of months now. And that's Vantage Ventures DiVersify, which has been this conversation about what we can do to create a more racially diverse economy here in West Virginia. And when we started having those discussions, we realized that the first necessary step was going to be to really take some time to learn about the challenges, the unique challenges that entrepreneurs of color face, but also to really take the time to celebrate the success that the entrepreneurs of color in our community are having. And one person who has been constantly available to help on this mission is our guest today, Morrison, who is the CEO of Storymaker Brands and Windmill Park Media. And he is someone that is beyond plugged into the W community, serving on our alumni board. And I don't think there's a better person to really inject some energy into what we're trying to do here today. And so, I could go on all day about him, but I'm really happy to introduce you guys to Morrison. How's it going, Morris?
What's up, everybody? What's up? How's everybody doing today? I'm doing good. I'm feeling good. I see Sarah Biller putting a comment in right now. I know that she's with President Gee right now. They're fundraising in Texas. I just got off the phone with President Gee and they were together. By the way, look at Sarah. Like, she's helping to extend our brand, knowing that we can't do it without money. Anyway, what's up, Sarah? See you comment now. I just got to say it.
Hey, well, look, that's the problem with this, right? I got to be careful because we know each other. So, we've had these conversations just a massive amount of times. But I need to be aware that there are some people that may not know you, may not be aware with your brand. So maybe you can give us a brief little blurb before we really get into it and tell us, who you are and what you do.
Listen, I'm a crazy guy who's still trying to figure this thing out. I didn't have much of a childhood, which means today I am a big kid. I have so much fun. People always talk about my energy and my enthusiasm. Some people, like even older ladies, like the little old lady at church, she came up to me one day and she said, "Baby, come here for a minute." And she turned me around. She said, "I just want to see if you have an on and off button behind your neck." And I was like, huh? And then she was saying, "I love your energy." She was saying, I love your energy. But guys, seriously, I lost my parents in New York when I was a baby. Then I was adopted and raised, of all places, from New York City to Fairmont, West Virginia, of all places. And I was raised in Fairmont. So I had, the heartbeat of a New Yorker pumping the blood through my veins, but I've got the blood of a West Virginia coal miner, because that was my experience. That's the community that raised me. Then, of course, I was orphaned a second time, losing my parents as a teenager. And on a fateful night at Reuben Memorial Hospital in Morgantown, I had to walk into a hospital room and say goodbye to the adult figure, the lady in my life, the lady I called grandma, named Gwendolyn. She was the lady who adopted me from New York. But the reasons why I got there were quite peculiar. Her son, who I called Dad, now his name was Chuck. He was falsely accused in West Virginia of shooting someone in the hand, and a gunshot wound that he didn't commit, but nevertheless, a crime he did not commit. He was still given 96 years in prison for a gunshot wound that he didn't. Was not his fault. And when he was taken on December 4th, which happens to be my birthday, and a few weeks later, I had to go to Reuben Memorial Hospital and say goodbye to his mother, the lady who, I called my New York City angel, the lady who was all I had left. And when I walked out of Reuben Memorial Hospital that night, after saying goodbye to her, I stood in that parking lot in Morgantown, West Virginia, knowing that my life had just changed, knowing that I was in the middle of a moment that was much, much, much bigger than me. A moment I couldn't negotiate, a moment that I couldn't outsmart or outwit. It was a moment that changed my life, but it was also the moment that unleashed, something inside of me that has led me to being where I am in the world today. I'm having a bunch of fun and I have a great life. I have an amazing wife named Lisa. Two beautiful girls, Dory, she's 7. And then we have our bonus daughter, Aaliyah, who's 8 years old, who lost her parents due to this crazy opioid epidemic that we're going through within our country right now. And so we got this bonus daughter, and I travel the world speaking, writing books, and just trying to make a difference where I can. And I'm just hoping that somebody's not going to wake me up at some point and tell me that this was all a dream and that my real name
Yeah.
is Bubba, and I live in a trailer park, and I have a gut that's hanging over my belt, and I've got diabetes, and I've only got 2 months to live. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, and someone doesn't tell
Yeah.
me that this is all a dream.
Wow. Wow. I mean,
By
that's
the way,
truly an
you're supposed to
inspiration.
laugh just now, Isaac. You were supposed to laugh when I called myself Bubba just now. Like I didn't get much of a
I think they have
reaction
it on mute.
from you.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
pretty
all
sure they
right,
have it on
good, good. Making sure you're there.
Yeah, no, all good, all good. Well, yeah, I mean, that's truly your story is inspirational. I think one of the areas that we can really dive into is that journey from on the latter half of where you are now. We're talking about from your work and education history. Walk us a little bit through that. What was it from you're leaving, we'll say undergrad or your MBA, and eventually reaching the point of CEO of Storymaker. What's the journey like there?
Well, the journey starts, I believe that there are things that are just part of our DNA. So let me go back. I'm not shy about saying this. My mother was a prostitute in New York City, and my father was her pimp in New York City. So, but what's interesting about that dynamic is my mother was the older one of the two. And she's the one who, when my father was around 15 years old, they met in Memphis, Tennessee, and she was a grown woman at this point. And she was very enterprising herself. She was very entrepreneurial. Um,
Mm,
she she said, "Hey, I'm going to work the streets, and I want you to protect me." And he didn't know what that meant. And basically, she's like, "Hey, you're going to be my pimp, and if anything goes wrong." And then eventually, my father had 6 brothers who ran a lot of the prostitution in New York City and Manhattan. They ran it literally.
mm,
And so my mother and my
yeah,
father eventually moved to New York City to take advantage of business opportunities that were there. Now I say it as business opportunities because that's what it was. And some people don't
mm,
like hearing the truth. Well, guess what? Sometimes the truth is not as glamorous as we want it to be, but the fact remains. My mother was a prostitute. My father was her pimp, which means they were both entrepreneurs. They both owned their own businesses.
yeah,
They sold a product that was not very glamorous, that many people wouldn't be proud of. But being an entrepreneur and being business minded, it was in my DNA since the day I was born. I mean, from the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I started collecting cans and collecting things that I could recycle because I found out that I could get paid money at the aluminum recycling place if I brought in bags of cans. So that's where my first
yeah,
business was. Then I started cutting grass, and all the ladies in our neighborhood started paying me pretty good money to cut their grass. And before you know it, I couldn't cut grass in the wintertime, but snow fell in the wintertime, which meant those same ladies, my same customers, they had a need for a different product in the wintertime. And then
there
by
you
the
go.
time I was 10 or 11 years old, because I have curly hair, nobody knew how to cut my hair. So I started cutting my hair when I was 10 or 11. And of course, I was horrible. I didn't know what I was doing. But I had no idea at the time that curly hair was the hardest hair to cut. And which meant once I figured my hair out, which by the way, no one has cut my hair since I was 11 years old. So I still cut
Yeah,
my own hair, but I made a lot of money cutting hair as a teenager and as a young adult. And that was really my first viable, thriving business. As a matter of fact, I joke and I say, if the IRS knew how much money I made straight cash cutting hair over the years, I'd be in a lot of trouble.
mm,
And I say that joke on
yeah.
stage and people like it. And I say, at some point, I'm going to have to stop telling that joke because someone from the IRS is going to call
Someone's
about,
gonna
the
call. Yeah,
cash that I made cutting hair. But listen, Isaac, I want the audience to appreciate, I was called to be an entrepreneur. And I think what we
mm,
discover in the stories of some of these entrepreneurs who have resilience and who face fortitude, they're able to go through things that other people just don't want to go through because
mm,
it's something that's inside of them. And so with my story of being orphaned twice, I didn't have anyone doing it for me. So I had to learn how to do things on my own. But with my parents giving me born into the life I was born into, I'm an entrepreneur. I just happen to
yeah,
love God and I happen to read the Bible school and I loved education. So that means I had integrity and I had ethics behind what I did. And so I would never sell drugs or become a pimp or go into prostitution because my ethics wouldn't allow me to do that. But I did want to reach people and I did want to impact people. And I knew that college, undergrad, and then a master's degree from WVU, which I graduated from the MSIR program, HR and Labor Relations. I knew that education would allow me the early opportunities that I needed to really start to trim away at developing my own personal brand so that I can, largely translate that into a corporate brand that clients pay for. And that's what's happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like that, a lot of the things that you encountered early on in your life have been, really great for developing that entrepreneurial spirit as you developed and as you move forward in life. Which I think transitions us really well to my next question, which would be, what were those really early entrepreneurial challenges that you encountered? And I'll add a caveat onto that. That's, were those challenges ever eased or exacerbated by being an entrepreneur of color?
Okay, so first of all, you're asking about challenges, and I want to separate this because there are challenges that people are going to go through no matter what your color is. So let's
Mhm.
talk challenges. The number one challenge I faced early on in life was how to tell my story, right?
Mm.
Every entrepreneur, before you have a viable product that anyone cares about remotely, people are buying you and you're selling yourself. So, and then eventually, if people give you a shot, you get opportunities, doors open, and people sample your products, then you get early customers, and then it's your product that speaks for itself
Mhm.
after a certain amount of time. But initially, on the front end, it's you. And the only way to get people to buy into what you're selling or what you're passionate about is you have to be a good storyteller. And so, early on in life, I didn't realize that I'm a natural storyteller. And the reason why is because people approach me from the time I was 12 years old and they say, wow, you lost two sets of parents. You've gone through so
Mhm.
much, yet you're the captain of the basketball team, your football team, you're involved in government, in high school, you're in AP classes. People would ask me, how is it that you've made it here and other people in your situation haven't? So right away, when
Mhm.
people ask me that question, Isaac, I was shaping my story, my storytelling techniques, and I didn't realize it. But I was just telling people how I made it. I was telling people, and by the way, for the people listening, if they say, well, Morris, how can I be a better storyteller? One of the first things you don't want to do when you tell your story is alienate someone or piss someone off or make someone angry because we're in a divided world right now. So if you say
Absolutely.
certain words, you can make someone angry and you don't even realize it. If you say the word Democrat to someone who's a Republican, they're not going to want to hear the rest of your story. If you say the words Republican to someone who's a Democrat, they're not going to want to hear the rest of your story. If you say Black Lives Matter to a person who doesn't believe in Black Lives Matter, or what am I saying? We have a lot of controversial things that we're struggling with as a society right now.
Mhm.
And so, what early entrepreneurs need to know right now is how can they tell their story in a way that galvanizes everyone, regardless who's
Mhm.
listening. And one of the things that I believe in is having values based and principles based conversations, right? Because people can't argue with your values or your principles. They can
Mhm.
argue with your political stance. People can argue
Mhm.
with you if you should take the vaccine or if you should not take the vaccine, which, if you want to create an argument right now, talk to someone who is or isn't taking a vaccine if they're the opposite of you, and you'll have a completely polarized conversation from that on it. If people are out there, if they want to get opportunities in business, let me be very clear. You must be a good storyteller. And in order to be a good storyteller, you must be able to tell people what you're passionate about and what you value and what principles you build your whole life on. Because listen,
Mhm.
times change, society will change. We'll be singing a different tune 2 years from now. There'll be different apps other than Instagram 5 years from now that everyone's talking about. But one thing that's timeless are values and principles. So now we're
Mhm.
talking about emotional intelligence. If you have the self awareness to truly know who you are and you can show up in a marketplace telling someone who you are and what you value and what principles you're building your business on, then that's how to be an effective storyteller. Does that make sense, Isaac?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that that also brings me then to, asking the question, what kind of, let's say there's, a young entrepreneur who's watching right now and they're like, Morris, I don't really know how to identify those things. Yeah, how do they identify those passions, those principles in their storytelling?
Uh, well, first of all, they're lying to themselves
Mm.
because you're stronger than you realize. Um, it's kind of like this. We're talking to adults here, so I'll talk premarital counseling. Our premarital counselor said something to my wife and I before we got married 10 years ago. She looked at my wife and she said, "Now, Lisa, your husband is going to come home from business trips, or Lisa, you're going to come home from a business trip, and one of you will have missed each other for 2 or 3 days, and you'll want to kiss and you'll want to cuddle and then maybe even be romantic." And she looked at my wife, Lisa, and she said, "That's when you should never look at your husband and say, 'Oh, I have a headache.'" She said, "Lisa, never say that. And then my wife said, but what if I have a headache? What if I really have a headache? And I never forget this. Our therapist, Carla, she said, if that's true, then hug your husband and give him a kiss and just hug him tight enough. And she said, and eventually the rest of your body will get the clue about what's about to happen next. Right? Right? And so here's the thing, Isaac, what is premarital counseling and being romantic with your spouse? What does that have to do with what you just asked? Well, here's the deal. People out there who think they don't know how to tell their story, or they don't think that they're good in those situations. What happens is they tell themselves that story long enough that they stop opening their mouths and they stop trying to tell their story. But the fact is, we're human beings, man. We'll forgive someone for not being articulate. We'll forgive someone for not telling the best story, but we will not forgive someone for being disingenuous or not being authentic. See, whenever someone talks about what they're passionate about, the thing that keeps them up at night, the thing they love more than anything, whenever someone talks about the thing that they would do for free, it doesn't matter how good of a storyteller they are. When you are talking about what you love the most, people will love you in that moment because they will watch you talk about things you love. And as a human being, every human being can recognize another human being who's excited. That happens deep within our limbic system in our brain. So for people out there who think they can't tell a story, they don't have a great story. You have a great story, Morrison. You were orphaned twice. You overcame so much. I say, wait a minute now, because I've got a lot of friends who were raised on the other side of the track. And they had two moms and dads, and they were doctors and lawyers, and they had big houses on the hill. And those kids' lives were miserable because their moms and dad never had time for them. So yeah, they were wealthy and they had parents where I had no money and I didn't have parents. So people think I have a story, but listen, we all have a story and we all have something to overcome. This gets back at emotional intelligence. You have to be honest with yourself about where your pain is and what you've had to overcome in your life. Because if you can if you can be vulnerable enough and transparent enough to talk about what you overcame, then once again, whoever listens to you when you talk about the real stuff that you overcome, there's a human being inside of you that other human being can't help but to connect with, because we're all human beings at the end of the day. Does that make sense, Isaac?
Perfect sense. Absolutely.
Okay.
I wasn't sure where you were going with the beginning talking about marital counseling, but I love that. I love that transition. I love bringing it full circle.
Oh, let me be real clear, just so everyone knows. What Carla told my wife is, give your husband a hug and give him a kiss and keep kissing him. And if you do that, it'll lead to other things. That's what she was saying. And my message to everybody listening, whether you think you're special or not, whether you think you have a story or not, open your mouth and talk to human beings like they're human beings. Don't try to sound perfect. Talk to people about where you find purpose, where you find joy, what you're passionate about. And when you do that, the human being in that person, human being, and before you know it, you are telling your story without even realizing it.
No, absolutely. And so, that seems to be a really important component of all stages of an entrepreneurial journey from beginning to end. Do you have any advice for those that are, maybe at the halfway point or moving towards the end of that journey? Is there anything, maybe even aside from the storytelling or even a more important aspect of the storytelling, that you would offer like as advice to, we can say anybody, but even more particularly entrepreneurs of color?
Entrepreneurs, you have to find out if your product sucks fast. So the faster you find out how horrible your product is, the faster you can innovate. So there's no glamorous way for me to say that. So for entrepreneurs who are in the middle of their journey, so to say, if you're in the middle of it, that means you've had some early success. And if you've had early success and you're still in your journey, that means you want more success. The only way to have more success as an entrepreneur is for more people to buy your product. And the only way for more people to buy your product, there's multiple ways. There's better marketing, there's more innovation, there's blah, blah, blah. There's all these other things. But the fastest way to become successful in business is to produce a product that your customer wants. And there's several ways to do that. First of all, detach your ego. See, the things that makes us great as entrepreneurs, we're driven, we're initiated. So we have all the things that it takes. but we also have ego. So if you have a product as an entrepreneur that's somewhat successful, get your ego the heck out of the way and ask your customers, why should I cannibalize this product? Which product should I get rid of? Which product should I retain? How should I make it better? And if you detach your ego and you actually ask your customers and you innovate and you take that product back to the drawing board as much as possible, and you can refine that product and make it better, the person who does that the fastest and the most often, they will ensure innovation and they will continue to grow based on what their customer wants, not what they want. And if you're giving your customer what they want, trust me, baby, you won't have to worry about how many widgets you're selling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love that. When we have these conversations, sometimes I think we talk a lot about networking, specifically the importance of networking. What would you say is the key for any entrepreneur really to take advantage of networking, and even entrepreneurs of color in more traditionally white spaces? What is the key to really take hold of networking and use it to your advantage?
Isaac, I'm going to teach you something that I learned as an orphan kid about Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners and what that has to do with networking. And it's not what you think. See, my problem without having a mom and dad is I was raised in a community where I had a lot of mom and dads. So like on Mother's Day, I remember when I started dating my wife, I had my motorcycle. I was like, yo, baby girl, you want to get on the back of this motorcycle with me? And on Sunday, you want to see what a Mother's Day looks like for me? She was like, yeah, but I'm not riding that motorcycle. I was like, whatever. So we got in the car. And at the end of the day, she realized we had 25 people that we visited, and she was exhausted. Well, I said, wait till Thanksgiving. And she came with me and did the same thing on Thanksgiving. Now, Isaac, I have, say, 10 different families who say, we're not having dinner until you get here, Morris. So my Thanksgiving dinner start at like 11 a.m. The next one is at 12:30 p.m. The next one is at 3. The next one's at 5, all the way until that night. And you know what my problem is on Thanksgiving Day? Every dinner that I show up at, I have to pretend like I didn't just eat at the last place. Because I have a family who's been waiting for me to come and eat, right? And because I've got all these moms and dads who love me, which is, I'm so grateful for that. But the problem is I would have to pretend like I was hungry every time I show. And the reality is I was not hungry. I was stuffed to the gills. What does that have to do with networking? We have a lot of people out here, Isaac, who want to learn how to network. But the true secret in networking is not even what happens when you're at the networking event. Yeah, that matters too. We can be precise and we can be intentional about what to do when we get there. But you know the most powerful part about networking is showing up. And most people aren't hungry enough to show up. I tell you something. I graduated about 15 years ago from the MSIR program, and I had like 8 different offers when I finished my master's degree. I think it was 10, something like that. I was hungry. Like I went to every career fair, I met every employer, and I made sure that I was like in their top 1 or 2 candidates that they each walked away with, because I was hungry. I didn't have a mom and dad, Isaac. I was literally, I had to create my success. Most people right now, they have so many fantastic business networking opportunities that they never show up to. Even right now, post-COVID world, there's still fantastic networking opportunities, right? Via Zoom. As you stated at the beginning, I'm one of the directors for our West Virginia University Alumni Association. And as a director, we've still had to find ways to innovate. So we still have talk series where we bring in pretty famous former alumni and pretty prestigious people every month, where everyone can just go to the WVU Alumni's webpage and see who the latest Zoom series is going to be with. So you could even show up in a Zoom digital space and network with people if you're hungry, if you make it a priority. And there are a lot of people who talk about the different generations, the boomers, the X's and the Z's, and how some people, they're lazy, some people aren't. I don't get into that because I don't want to demotivate people. I want people to hear me. If you want to be a great networker, step 1, show up to every networking opportunity that you have, whether it's a digital space or whether it's a physical space. And if you do that, then automatically you'll learn how to tell a better story when you get there, which goes back to storytelling. We talked about that earlier. You'll learn who to follow up with and who not to follow up with. You should take your business cards. You should get their business card. You shouldn't, if you know someone is there and they're from Google and you've been waiting all night to talk to that hiring manager from Google, you'll know little things like go talk to him, introduce yourself, be as impressive as you can, ask him questions, but also don't hog him all night because there are other students who want to talk to the man from Google also, right? You'll learn these principles over time, right? And how to be a better steward and how to network within community of other people who are there to network that night, because you want to be generous and you want to be nice to the other networkers that are there. You learn those things over time. Like everything else, like going to the gym, networking becomes a muscle that the more you start to use it, the more you'll start to see that it's easier than we realize at times. You just got to show up.
Right. Dang. No, I love that. My phone is actually blowing up with some audience questions, so I'm hoping that we can get to some of those if you're down for that.
Let's get it. And I want to address something before you transition to a question.
Yeah,
you asked me earlier about advice, what I would have to for any entrepreneurs of color. My first advice is forget that you have a color. All right, that's my first advice. I say the same thing to, I do a lot of women's leadership empowerment summits. I talk to young girls, young adults, young women, and I talk to ladies who are trying to just really grow their brands. And they say, well, what do I need to do as a woman? One of the first things I say is celebrate the fact that you are a woman, because that's powerful. Like the best thing God ever created, in my opinion, was a woman, right? Celebrate that. And at the same time, when you go in that room, go in the room to kill it. Go in there like that room is yours to own. And don't think that you're at a disadvantage as a woman. And me, growing up Black in West Virginia and as a Black man in America, have I come across racist people? Of course I can't. I have. I've come across, I got some Black family members that don't like white people. So let me say that, right? I've seen, listen, there's been some times that I was probably racist towards someone who didn't look like me. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm Black. I can't act racist towards someone, right? What I believe is we all have biases towards people. Now, have I faced oppression and racist systems in this country? Absolutely not. And here's my mindset. Maybe I did, but if I faced them, I didn't know it and I didn't see it, because I will never allow myself to be defeated with that type of mindset. Every meeting I walk in like the meeting doesn't start until I get there. And I lead. I've been the same way since I was young. And that doesn't mean I'm talking over everyone at a meeting. I had a mentor who told me and taught me at a young age. He said, Morris, sometimes you'll need to walk into a meeting and you will need to be the quietest one in a room that day. He said, and then sometimes you'll need to walk into a meeting, and because you need to rise up in leadership and they need your expertise, you'll need to carry the conversation and be the loudest one. He said, the strength in your leadership will be determined by the wisdom of knowing which room you're in and when you need to speak up and when you need to be quiet. So it sounds like I was given a statement just now about racism and systems, and because I get the same questions, about female and about feminism and about a lot of different things. And I tell people, celebrate what you are. If you're a female, celebrate that. If you're a Black male and that's important to you, celebrate that. If you're Jewish and you're from Brooklyn and that's what you love, celebrate that. Celebrate whatever you want people to celebrate in you, because that's important. We all need to be seen. We need to be celebrated for who we are. However, when it comes to leveraging opportunity, never let who you are or even what you think you are keep you from having a defeated mindset before you walk into any situation, because you will miss out on a lot of opportunities that way.
That is a powerful lesson on confidence. Truly is. So I'll switch over then to the live questions that we're getting. So this one is, can Morris share more about his successful businesses?
Good. I got several. Yeah. I'm well diversified.
You got to brag a little bit.
Well, I don't like doing that because it is what it is. But here's what I believe. So my favorite business is the Morrison Foundation. Let me say that. So I didn't want to name it that. I wanted to name it the Gwen Sanders Foundation, because Gwendolyn Sanders was the lady who took me off the streets in New York and raised me in Fairmont, West Virginia at 110 Westline Street, right? So I wanted to name the foundation hers, but we realized through IRS and tax legal stuff, I could run into a problem later on down the street with taxation issues, because Tom Brady has the Tom Brady Foundation. There was the Michael Jackson Foundation, the Denzel Washington Foundation. And when people see that, they understand that it's the charitable arm of you as an entertainer, as a businessman. And I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, I'm an author. So, but I bring up the Morrison Foundation because it's a way for my wife and my family now to be generous when we're called to be that, when we feel like we need to show up in a space to help and be more generous. Um, so that's what I'm most proud of. But the others are just means of doing business. We have Morrison Global Brands, which is our North Carolina entity that serves as the corporate structure, the S corporation that we use to conduct most of our businesses with companies like the National Basketball Association, Microsoft, GE, this company, that company, you name it, many corporations. Then we have Storymaker Brands, which is really the newest company that we're happy with here, based out of South Carolina. My daughter named that company. She is 7 years old. That's another company that we use for consulting and reaching customers. My daughter, this past summer, she told me we were walking throughout Daniel Island where I live at, and we came across a guy who was talking to my daughter, and he said, "Well, what's your daddy do?" And she said, "My daddy makes a living on stage and he writes books." She said, "But my daddy's a story maker." And then the guy was confused. He said, "Do you mean your daddy's a storyteller?" She goes, "No, no, no." She said, "My daddy teaches people how to make their story." And, after I pulled myself up off the sidewalk and after I stopped sobbing like a baby,
Yeah.
and seeing your 6-year-old daughter tell you that you're a story maker, I spent the next 3 days in the studios thinking, what's the difference between a storyteller and a story maker? And I realized storytellers are very important. Authors are storytellers, playwrights. There are a lot of storytellers. Even musicians tell stories through music. But when you're a storyteller, you're regurgitating information and you're telling your version of the events as they occurred. But when you're a story maker, graduates from West Virginia University, see, story makers, they own every ounce of the process. They own the story from the vision of what they want. Story makers go after the vision. They hold themselves accountable. They're entrepreneurial in their pursuit, and they don't let anything get in their way. That's the difference between a storyteller and a story maker. So Storymaker Brands is another one of our corporations that we use to reach a variety of organizations, including men and women who are locked up in prison, which is people always ask me where my favorite place to speak at is. And I love speaking in prisons to women and men who are locked away and forgotten about. And they have so much gratitude when a guy like me comes in and looks at them and laughs with them and cries with them and says, "Hey, listen, man, I want you guys to be stronger, smarter, kinder human beings," which is the moniker and the essence of what Storymaker Brands is about. We want to spend the rest of our lives developing stronger, smarter, kinder human beings. We do that for CEOs at the corporate level. And we do that for men and women who may be locked away in a prison because they made one mistake when they were 18 and they got 20 years in prison. Or some people like my foster dad, Chuck, who was falsely accused of and given 100 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. So that's what Storymaker Brands does. And of course, we have Windmill Park Media, which is the media arm that develops everything from our podcast that's getting ready to be released to our video series to just every aspect where Morrison or any of our groups has to show up digitally with media. That's what Windmill Park Media is. And we are getting ready to shift our structure, and we're getting ready to have a Florida-based company with some partners that are going to basically become the holding company that takes ownership of all of our companies. Why? Because Florida, Tennessee, and Texas are state tax exempt areas.
I was about to say, yeah.
With the new Joe Biden tax plan that me and many other entrepreneurs are not a fan of, we are forced to restructure ourselves. So to make sure that all of my companies, through the charities that we have with Morrison Foundation, we are either going to donate our money away or do whatever we have to do to make sure that we are paying as little federal taxes as possible, even if it means giving it away to other people who can use it. So we are we're shifting. So whoever asked the question about my other companies, I want you guys to know as entrepreneurs, this is a day and time when you don't just have to be focused about the product that you want to create as an entrepreneur. Find a great accountant that you can work with, but also I would hire a tax strategist, a great financial analyst in the form of a tax consultant who can help you be structured on paper so that you and your family keep the proceeds and the income from your business as much as possible while paying as little taxes as possible, while also giving money to your churches, to your communities, and to your schools and people around you who need a helping hand from the success of your business. Listen, you can either pay the money in taxes and give the money to the government, or give it to other organizations that need it. But you are going to write that check one way or another. It's inevitable. So remember that.
Absolutely. That actually kind of like answered our second question that we had coming in, which was what were your tips for actually this is a different question. Do you have any tips for building a successful team for a startup?
You know what? That's one of the age-old tricks that people say that you already know the answer. Hire people that are smarter than you. But I take that to another level. If you're going to build a team, make sure you build a team with people, obviously, who are capable, who have capacity, and who have competency. Yes, they've got to have the skill set. That's a given. But there's one other thing. You know, I've become a big fan of Nikola Tesla recently. And one of the things that Nikola Tesla said, and he's considered probably the greatest inventor ever. And people who study him most, they know that Nikola Tesla had a lot of his stuff taken from entities, and there's stuff that the government still has about Nikola Tesla's findings that are, put it this way, Nikola Tesla, 80% of the technology that runs the world today is founded on technology that he founded. And people who go even deeper say it could be as high as even 90%, but he was a smart man.
Wow.
So he said this, and his quote that he said, I think, has a lot to do with how to build successful teams. He said, if you want to understand the true mysteries of the universe, think in terms of three things and three things only. And that is energy, frequency, and wavelength. And I describe it as saying this. I get hired to speak for a lot of the top companies in the world, and I always ask everyone the same question. Why did you hire me? And inevitably, I think 95% of the people say the same thing. They say, Morris, we just love your energy. And when I started my companies full-time 10 years ago, I started hearing it a lot. But then eventually I started making sure that we marketed my products as saying, hey, this product will help you. It'll help you develop your emotional intelligence, better leaders, better results, yada, yada. But man, you're just going to like my energy at the end of the day. So I want people to hear this. If you want to build great teams, don't just hire people who are smarter than you and who have capacity and competency. Hire people who, when they are in the room with you, it shifts literally the cells in your body. Like your hair's jumping up and down when you're around this guy or this girl, just in their presence. That's how you know you have the right people. Because listen, some people will energize you, but then some people out there will do the opposite. They will suck and drain you of energy. And there's a lot of technical people who have great skill sets. And maybe you can still hire a few people who drain your energy and who suck the life out of you. If you can put them in a back room and no one ever see them and they're going to crunch your numbers or something like that, then maybe you can still have a spot on your team for people who don't have the best energy. But I'm going to tell you something. If you want to build a great team, build it with people who make you feel like you come alive just in their presence.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, look, I obviously want to be like conscious of your time. But I do have one more question that's from me. And then this is kind of a broad, bigger picture question.
And time out, hold on.
So you're a motivator. Yeah.
Before you ask the question, I've got a few minutes. I want to make sure, are there any other questions that came in before we get to your last one?
Let's double check.
Any other questions that you think, we should definitely get to? I'll make the time for it.
Yeah, no, they only fed me, they fed me 2 of them. So
good. That's great. That's great. Yeah. That's great. What was yours?
Yeah. So mine is, you're a motivator. That's one of your overarching themes that we kind of keep coming back to. You're a story maker. And we're naturally in difficult times right now. This is something that we've alluded to, that we've been talking about. These, politically divisive times. We're in a pandemic. The Browns beat the Steelers in the playoffs. I mean, these are dark times. What do you find to be the key to staying motivated, most importantly, and staying positive in these types of times?
Well, here's what's interesting. A lot of people call me a motivational speaker, and I absolutely despise that title. Mm-hmm. But just because I believe that motivation is an emotional reaction, and I believe that you can't sustain motivation. Motivation is short-lived. It's an emotional feeling that comes and it goes. It's just the same thing that happens when you watch your favorite movie or hear your favorite song. I want to be someone that helps people have experiences that are unforgettable, experiences that stay with them in the form of products and services that challenge people to be better versions of themselves. But ultimately, I just want to be a guy that's remembered at the end of the day as a guy who helps people take extreme ownership. And when I say extreme ownership, here's what I mean. I have what I call an orphan's mindset. So as an orphan, I went my whole life knowing intuitively, without even saying it to myself or someone saying it to me, that no one was ever going to walk through the door to save me. I knew that. I knew as an entrepreneur, even when I started my businesses, I never sought out startup funds or any business loans, anything like that, because it's just my mindset. I have an extreme ownership mindset. I've never, ever depended on anyone to do anything. And I've got my 3 basic fundamental building blocks that I've shared with every customer, I share on every podcast. And it's number one, don't be a victim. So, number one, whoever you are listening to this, you probably have reasons to complain. But if you never allow yourself to be a victim, and if you don't allow yourself to complain, then what you'll see is the positive side of what happens when you're not a victim and when you don't complain. You'll start to see that life is pretty good. But then number two, I believe in taking responsibility and ownership for everything that you have. That's your talents, your gifts, your abilities, even your situations. Because a lot of us are in some pretty crappy situations that are our faults, by the way. So number one, don't be a victim. Two, take ownership of your life. But number three, I believe that we should never expect someone to give us something that we don't earn. So if we do those 3 things and we don't be a victim and we own it and we earn it, it's amazing what happens in life when you go through life. So when people call me a motivator, I appreciate that. And I see the sincerity. I see what people mean by that. But really, man, I'm a guy who, this stuff that I talk, Isaac, you can ask my wife. I live this 24/7. This is who I am. This is how I am. And I just happen to get to do this. I happen to have created a business where people pay me money to be who I am off stage. They pay me to be that guy on stage. So that level of congruency, to me, that starts with emotional intelligence. I mean, I am a very emotionally intelligent person. I'm extremely self-aware. I have developed an ability to self-manage and regulate myself. Because there's things that piss me off. There's people that make me angry. There's things that make me sad. There's things that make me happy. But what happens if I'm in a business meeting or a board meeting and I feel something brewing up in my emotions and I want to cut someone's head off, right? Because I'm angry, because someone's not being a good steward of the business, or because someone's making stupid mistakes. And I just want to lean across the table and shake the hell out of them, right? Well, I have to self-regulate in that moment, right? And being emotionally intelligent helps me understand that. So for the people listening, you know, don't look at me as a motivator. You have to motivate yourself. And it's very easy to do that if you take time to cut off the news, stop watching so much TV, get off of social media, because for most people, the relationship with social media is unbalanced and it's unhealthy because the relationship drives them. They don't drive the relationship. So if you find yourself hearing your phone vibrate, and every time you hear your phone go, if you can't deny yourself the ability to reach over and see what that notification was, that's how you know you're addicted. So I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggling today because they can't self-manage. They can't manage to cut the social media off, to put their phone down. And what I'm seeing is the entrepreneurs out there who can find solitude and silence and get away from the world just for a little bit each day to think and to be alone in their thoughts. Those are the people who are crushing it and killing it as entrepreneurs. They're the ones who have products that are insatiable, that people just can't do without, because they're driving innovation and they're coming up with these great catchy ideas and marketing slogans. But see, for people who are constantly on social media, what happens is you're losing when it comes to self-awareness and emotional intelligence, because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people instead of getting quiet and getting away and disconnecting and figuring out what makes you awesome, and then being confident about what makes you awesome, and then taking that to the world and putting a product behind it and charging people a bunch of money for it. See, there's space for that. There's always going to be space, Isaac, for original, authentic, genuine thinkers who have the who are courageous enough to be confident and say, listen, I don't care if this business fails. I don't care if people think this product sucks or if it's horrible. I don't care if I have to start 5 businesses that all fail before I get to the 6th business. Those are the people who become wildly successful. And people who find a way to do that while serving others. And for me, my faith in God means a lot. So, I get a chance to lead with my faith and with my values and my principles. I get a chance to serve customers. And I just feel like this is a dream, Isaac, because I love my life and I love what I do. and no one can take this away from me at the end of the day. And I want to end with everyone hearing me say this. If you want to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter if you're a girl. It doesn't matter if you're from the hollers of Southern West Virginia or if you're from New York City. The great equalizer, the thing that puts everyone on an equal playing field, is action. Not even perfect action, but which one of you are going to take your ideas and do something with it? Whoever you are listening to this, if you can actualize the ideas running around in your brain and put them on paper, then create a product or service or something behind those, you're not going to be successful at everything you try. But man, you can innovate much faster. And if you're listening to your customers along the way and doing what they want you to do, instead of just putting your pride and ego in it, then you'll develop healthier products that your customers want. And then that's when they start paying you money that you don't deserve, in my opinion.
Action. I don't think that there is a better note for us to end on today than action. Well, first I want to say thank you to you, obviously, for tuning in, for being a part of this talk. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think that we've definitely inspired some people today, and I think that we're raising a lot of awareness for diversity and entrepreneurs of color here in Appalachia. And for those tuning in right now, I want to say thank you, and that feel free to check us out on Vantage Ventures Facebook and Instagram at Vantage Ventures to stay up to date on everything that's going on with Vantage Diversify. Once again, Morrison, thank you, and looking forward to getting together soon.
Yes. Let's make it happen. I'm here to serve. Let me know what I can do. We're here.